Hi, I'm Issie Barratt and I'm the Artistic Director of the National Youth Jazz Collective. Welcome to our hashtag National Youth Jazz Wednesday. Slightly precarious today in that my internet, thank you BT, doesn't work. So we're using good old O2 and my mobile phone. So fingers crossed everything holds for the next hour. And jolly well should too, us because we've got two amazing guests to join us to talk about jazz, creativity, education, and what it's like to be involved with NYJC. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our two guests to join us. Both were actually involved in our first summer school in 2007. And yes, in 14 months' time, we're going to be so watch out for that. Also, both met each other again at Leeds College, and then both came and taught for us. So, first of all, please could you welcome to the dear friend and fabulous tutor, Sam Watt. Hello, Sam!
Hello, how are you doing? I'm here. I am here. Surprise. Hello.
Nice to see you. Hi.
Yeah,
so we've known each other for the full duration of the 13 years of NYJC in many different guises, and obviously now a very important, significant, integral part of the teaching faculty. Wonderful to see you.
Yeah, likewise. Great to see you.
And then I'm very glad to also have the opportunity to bring into conversation a dear colleague of both of ours and friend and someone that was involved in some school, but has been hugely instrumental in jazz education across the whole of Great Britain. And I'm very much hoping that we can talk about that when she joins us. Please welcome to the stage very dear friend, Dr. Cathy Dyson.
Hey, hello.
Hi, Cathy.
Nice to be here. Thank you. Good to see you. Good to be alive, really alive and in one piece.
Still doing it, no matter, defiantly, all of us. Jazz lives forever. What's great is the fact that we were working together on some school. That was very lovely, very full-on, intense week, and then off we all went on our holidays and haven't really touched base since. So it's really nice to have that opportunity now to sort of reconnect and have a conversation. And during the course of the conversation, those of you that are watching, we are going to be actually delving into some of the things that we were doing on the summer school. And there are particular things that Cathy and Sam led on, which I just thought was so fascinating. We wanted to bring it to this forum to share it with you all. So if any of you got any questions, just to remind you that you can put those in the comments of Facebook, and they get fed to us by our wonderful program manager through the chat option as well. So please do, as we go along, don't be shy to ask questions. That's what we're here for. So if I may, I think I'd like to dive straight in to begin with, to talk about what we were doing over the summer school, and then a little bit further on to then talk to you both individually about your careers and your creativity, your projects, and how you got to where you are today. But I'm so infused by what you were talking about over the summer school. I'm kind of bursting to share it with everybody, which was basically what we were looking at. Cathy, might you explain what it was you and Sam were looking at with the youngsters together?
Well, as you know, Izzy, you usually have a rhythm section workshop, don't you? Yeah. You usually have a rhythm section workshop going, don't you, on the summer school? And we usually do that. It's always a lot of fun and very interesting. But Sam rang me up and said, we can't really do it in the same way this year, obviously, because it was online. And we just felt it would be too complicated to try and get everybody to play and get everybody to play in sync and actually get a rhythm section together. So we decided we would take some really interesting and wide-ranging recordings of rhythm sections doing a variety of different things and do some deep listening with the students, and then explain to them and analyze them in sort of orally, and then explain to the students that you can do almost anything in rhythm sections, and rhythm sections do, so depending on the actual musical context. So we've got quite eclectic taste, me and Sam, so we had some very, very different tracks, which is really, really good. And we played some really contrasting music as well, so to show the full range of what you could actually do with just another guitar, with a full rhythm section, and so on, all groove-based stuff, freer stuff. And so yes, so we took a really good selection of those, and we went through and we looked at, basically we were looking at the contour of the of the rhythm section, what it did over the course of the tune, how it followed the soloist or not, how it went, how the rhythm section did something completely different. The kind of what, you know, the times when it went down to nothing in terms of dynamics, because as you know, students often don't think about dynamics quite as much as they should. So thinking about dynamics coming right down, coming right up in terms of intensity and volume and all that kind of thing. And so we tried to show the full range of what you could do within a rhythm section context. That's what we did.
And I think what we're going to do after this conversation is we're actually going to create a Spotify playlist with those tracks and pop them, and so what people can revisit this post, and it will be added to this post probably on Tuesday, to be honest, because we don't do Thursdays and Fridays at NYJC. So that's really great of you. It's really great of you. We'd love to, but you know, it's all down to funding. And so, does anybody watching who would like to donate to help us do Thursdays and Fridays? Sam, I'm wondering, Sam, if you might give an idea of some of the tracks that you chose, first of all, and if you might even, and then we'll go back to Cathy to invite her to share the tracks that Cathy chose as well. But Sam, which tracks did you choose and why? What was it particularly about those tracks?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, so yeah, one of the things I loved was the ones Cathy chose was just a bit of a revelation to me as well, because I didn't know them, so that was really cool. But yeah, the main one the one I spent the most time talking about was this video. It's absolutely incredible. I first saw it, I must have first seen it when I was about 18, 19. And I must have watched it, like, if you go on YouTube, you can see it's got like, I don't know, 20,000 views. I reckon 1,000 of them are me. I must have watched it so many times. And it's this video of Joe Lovano, the saxophone player, playing Portrait of Jenny with Kenny Werner and, what's the name? Bill Lee on bass, and Jeff Williams on drums, who's a drummer who lives, I think he's sort of 50-50 in the States and here, isn't he? I'm not sure exactly where. Yeah. Anyway, so I've seen him playing live quite a few times. But the thing about this video that was amazing is just the way they just kind of shape the thing so it's such a gradual build that you almost don't notice it's happening, and then after 5 minutes of the thing, it's really built up to this incredible climax, and everyone's really going for it. And then just when you think it's gonna finish, Joe Lovano just takes off and decides to do another solo. You know, it comes back. It's supposed to be the tune at the end. He's like, no, another solo, and it just goes completely another level. You know, it's really amazing, and I just thought it was a really cool thing to show everyone, because I know one thing I noticed quite a lot is that if you're playing a ballad without any kind of arrangement in a sort of jazz standards gig type situation, it's the sort of thing that unless people really engage with it, it can kind of get a bit flat and sort of flatline and take a long time and nothing really happens. And I just thought it's really good to show everyone what's possible with that, you know. And
so we will add the YouTube link as well on the Facebook post after the conversation, so people can join. Just to remind everybody, one of the reasons we can't share things so easily on Facebook is because they've changed their policy about sharing things on Facebook. So we are actually talking to them at the moment to see if there's a way that we can get licensing so that we can continue to use it as an educational platform. So, but for now, we'll just add the links, and then people can access it that way. So that's great. And what was it particularly about, from a pianist perspective, about the sort of the rhythm section? Was there anything that you might actually think, I'm going to take that away and actually?
Well, actually, so I did with that one when I was at Leeds College of Music. I actually took down everything that Kenny Werner played on the track, because I thought it was perfect, just to fit the context perfectly. And yeah, I mean, the thing that he does there is like he just very subtly notches up the levels of how swinging it is. You know, it starts off very chilled out, and the whole band's with him the whole time, every step of the way. But the way because I think sometimes we've got this thing, if we're playing and we decided on ballad we're going to go into swing, it's like this one big event and then we're in swing. So the track is like ballad, swing for the rest of it, you know. And he just really subtly shifts into the swing and sort of notches it up. And some of there's some crazy harmonic things he does there. It's not really to do with playing as an ensemble, but that was certainly worth checking out for me as well. I still don't understand exactly what's the logic to what he did there, but the thing that he does at the start of his solo is really cool.
Brilliant. So that's great. And looking forward to everybody hearing it, and even maybe putting some comments afterwards, because we could always get the comments later on if people want to say things in a week or two while they're listening. You know, you can keep telling us what you think of our ideas that we're sharing, so please do feedback on it. I know that Sam and Cathy and myself would love to hear what you think of the tracks that we're recommending. So is there one particular track that Cathy chose that you'd like to nominate for Cathy to talk to us about, that made you said yourself that when you heard some of them, they were a revelation for yourself? So which one was the one that had the most impact
Jonathan Kreisberg
on
one
you,
that she
think?
played, that was just phenomenal. That was amazing. I mean, it's up to Cathy, but I thought that was amazing.
Might you tell us a bit about it, Cathy?
Sorry. Yeah. It was called The Lift, and it was by Jonathan Kreisberg. It's from his Capturing Spirits album. I went to see him actually in Manchester last year, and it's a really good story because he recorded it live in Germany, and he didn't know it was being recorded. The whole band didn't know it was being recorded. Apparently, he'd organised it. He'd organised it with the club previously, and then forgotten completely, and they didn't mention it. So it's quite astonishing, really. But anyway, they recorded it and didn't realise, and they had this almost perfect set. So we decided to put it out, and it's just so great because it's got that real energy of live, whilst being really greatly well recorded live. You know, everybody's quiet except at the ends, and it's just really ace. The whole thing's really ace. But he just plays. I mean, I'm really impressed with Jonathan Kreisberg, and I did an interview with him actually for the radio a few months ago, and he's just incredibly
Can people
on
hear
it.
that online? Sorry,
Yeah, I think it might have gone now.
That?
It was online on the radio, but actually I think it might. But I can send a link to it to get it back.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Yeah,
it's really nice actually. But he was talking about the whole process of it, and this is called The Lift, which is like, you know, lifting you up and being inspiration. It really did. On the gig, it was fantastic. I mean, it was just like, it was so full of energy, and they had a really bad time getting there, and they'd had a bad journey, and there was a strike on the train, and there was all kinds of trouble getting there, and they were really late. You know, it was one of those gigs where everything goes wrong, and we're all waiting outside, and we're supposed to start at 7 and it didn't, and then it was, you know, and then on and on, and they got on, and we were like, oh, I hope it'll be okay, and it was just amazing. Anyway, so we played all these tracks, and this is the one I really like, The Lift. I like them all actually. They're all great tracks, and I thought that everybody, I thought the students would really like to hear it. A, because it's great music, but B, because the rhythm section is so absolutely together, you know, like linking in and listening the whole time. And because they've played the music a lot, they've played the music for at least a year before they recorded this whole album. So it really, and you can really tell that. You can really tell when people have really learnt the music and absorbed it and internalized it, and because it feels completely natural, you know. And it felt completely natural. So there's ostinatos in the background. It really builds through the solos, then it comes right down for the piano solo, and then, you know, and it's just it's a great track, but the rhythm section do amazing things on it. And so I thought they should hear that, because basically every time I hear it, it just cheers me up enormously. In fact, that whole album does, but that one particularly, because it's so full of positive energy. And I mean, I like a groove based tune, you know. I do enjoy groove based music, so I'm really up for that. So yeah, so that was the one, and I think Sam liked it. I think a lot of people liked it actually. A lot of the kids liked it, yeah.
So the ebb and flow of the rhythm section, and the way that it was sort of the contours, like a little bit like a shoal of fish, they're all moving together.
Yeah.
I'm wondering with that, from both of you, maybe if we start with Cathy and Sam maybe can come in afterwards, how, when you yourselves are playing with musicians, that you, particularly those musicians that you think, oh, this is my family, this is my tribe, these are the musicians I really enjoy playing with, whether you just leave it to the time when you're playing and rehearsing, or if you actually do something a bit more proactively with a member of the rhythm section to sort of make that connection between the two of you. Are there the particular tricks or methods that you've applied where you to get that spontaneity that's become second nature? Cathy?
Well, I think if people really know your music, it really helps, because they can then tend to feel where it should go different, you know. And if they really know how you play as well, they have to know how you play and how you respond, and what kind of arc of your improvising is like, you know. Or when you start to play, what kind of feel you wanting. If you get that attuned to them, then they will really respond to you. And I think that's what was happening with the Jonathan Kreisberg. The other thing is that they were really completely concentrating. even though they'd had that really rough time getting there. And, you know, it's all over the place. When they got on the stage, that's it. It's like complete focus and complete concentration. And, you know, I was watching Colin Stranahan, actually, the drummer, because he's just an amazing drummer. And he was really, really responsive the whole time to everything that was going on. You know, not just imitating, but listening, putting things in, leaving things out, coming right down. You know, all of the things that you really want to happen. So I think it's a combination of knowing the music really well. It's a combination of feeling really relaxed in that music, and then being completely in the moment when you're playing, and completely with it. You know, and sort of, because they were incredibly supportive of each other as well, musically supportive of you know, trying to make it work. Yeah.
And I think that, you know, often people misunderstand the thing about knowing the music really well. It implies, you know, doing lots of practice in your bedroom so that you really know the whole thing. I think it's collective knowing, isn't it, that really brings the music alive. You can't. There's only so much you can do on your own. It is a sport. You have to be a team player, and you have to do it regularly together in order to get that knowingness.
Well, there's a really good example, actually, because there's a YouTube video of Chris Potter playing, I think he's playing Green Pastures, actually, and it's a live gig somewhere, and it is just nowhere near as together as when he plays it on the album. It's probably 18 months later. And that really did it for me, because I thought, well, these are the most amazing musicians. They're the best players, some of the best players on the planet. And even they were getting it together on that gig. You know, it was great, but it wasn't quite as good as it is when you hear it on the album, and or as fast, or as fluent, or as anything. And the reason is because they played it loads before they actually, even at their level, you know, and they played it live, and they really, you know, really delved into it deeply to make it happen. Yeah.
Brilliant. Sam, I'm wondering yourself if there are any sort of top tips or tactics that you've used in order to sort of really develop that sort of relationship with other rhythm section players in a sort of more of a band situation, so that you get that rapport and you develop it more. Are there any things? Because I know, for example, I've spoken to Dave Holland quite a lot about the way that he works with drummers, and often he'll go off as a duo, just the drummer and the bass, and spend time working together, not having the whole of the rhythm section, just so that they actually think like one unit. And I'm wondering, are there any ways that you yourself, Sam, have put those sort of techniques into practice, especially because you've got quite a broad spectrum of different genres that you play?
Yeah, actually, it was funny when you said that. It made me think quite a lot about it. And I kind of had two things that occurred to me, which was that, I mean, one thing is that I haven't done this for a while, but when I was at college, we did this with my friends. That we were all, it was lucky because we were all into the same thing at the same time. We were basically all really into that Miles Davis 60s quartet with Herbie Hancock and Ron Carter and Tony Williams. Sorry, quintet with Wayne Shorter or George Coleman as well. And I was just transcribing all the stuff that was happening in the rhythm section, thinking like, how does it fit together? How could that have, you know, trying to get into the mindset of how could they have done that stuff? And so some of my friends, we used to get together and actually try out specific hookups that we'd heard on those records. So like there's some things where they play in groups of 3 over the 4s. We say, okay, let's try and play a tune and start doing that. Someone's got to start doing that at some point, and we'll try and latch on, or have 2 or 3 different ones that we're going to start doing, and you've got to listen out and try and do it. And that was quite fun and quite helpful way to do it that way. So that was one side of it. But then the other one, because that's something you can do if you've got lots of time to rehearse. You know, I was studying, so I had all the time in the world. We would get together and play like 3 times a week, but nowadays it's not, you know, not viable to do that right now it's not viable at all, but you know, it's quite hard to rehearse that much. So but one thing that I think is, so because I play a lot of Brazilian music as well, and one thing that I think really helps in terms of building those hookups is having a kind of shared listening, things that you've all listened to and checked out. And if there's music that you know that someone else knows, I mean, it comes up all the time on standard gigs as well. If there's a tune that you know and someone else knows it, and there's a particular arrangement that's quite well known, then everyone knows that arrangement. You can just start doing it, and if the other person knows that record as well, you can latch on and do the same thing, you know. And with these Brazilian grooves and rhythms, so there's quite a few kind of slightly more obscure rhythms that are, but they're nevertheless quite specific set things. So if you go into one of those and the other people have that musical language, you know, you can, as a band, you can kind of ride the waves a bit, but that comes from not from the fact that we've rehearsed a lot, but from the fact that we know the same listening references, and we understand what's happening when that happens. Does that make sense?
It does. It makes total sense. And I'm wondering, you know, the first way that you described, where you basically lifted the bonnet up of the car and said, "How does this engine work?"
Exactly,
and then
yeah.
meticulously took it to pieces, and then sort of shared it with everybody else. How did it then manifest itself afterwards? Did you find that you could feel the sort of influence and the impact of what you'd done when you were then playing in general?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one thing I always think about anything with music is like, if you're trying to sound like someone or get something together, trying to get into the mindset of what's going on there. And instead of having this idea that someone's somehow superhuman and that they're doing something that's too complicated for your brain to process, just try and understand what they're actually thinking. And for me, that really helped me realize that they're not just these, you know, this superhuman trio that can just sort of adapt to whatever they hear instantly. They've got little systems in place that they've worked out as a band from playing together every night. And so then I started to think, okay, how can I play something where it sort of implies something in a clear way that someone else can do something to fit with it or go against it, but how can I communicate, you know, in the way that band did? And I think to me it feels like, having done that, if I'm on a gig and someone starts playing in that more sort of loose way on a jazz thing, I'm prepared. I'm ready. I'm like, okay, we're going into that world. Cool, you know, instead of just not noticing what they were doing or not knowing what it was, you know.
So even like contextually and concept-wise, that sort of the concept itself becomes familiar. It's like, oh, I see. It's not necessarily note specific or even tempo or key, but it's more, concept.
Exactly, yeah. I think for me, it's all about getting into if you can get into the mindset of the people you're listening to, then you'll be able to do it, you know.
So Cathy, with that in mind, with all this sort of copying and mimicry that was an integral part of the way that we all learn and teach, I'm wondering if you might help us explain to people what the relevance of that is, because surely, you know, people say surely jazz is about being yourself and making it up as you go along. So Cathy, might you help describe what
well, if you take a sporting analogy, it would be like you know, the French Open is currently on. It would be like me going onto the tennis court and trying to play tennis, not having actually done any of the prior practice. So you have to, I mean, it'd be ridiculous, you know. And if you think of it like that, if people say to you, well, you know, you make it up, you go along, as people used to say to me, oh, well, you know, you make it up, you go along. So basically you have to have on whatever instrument it is you're playing, you have to be able to hear a note and play it on the instrument, or hear a phrase and play it on the instrument, and so forth. So you have to be able to know what all those intervals are and know where you are. And so that takes an awful lot of practice. And a really good way of doing it is to actually take a little solo down. Take lots of solos down. Start very simply. Think about, you know, listen to the chord progression, listen to the whole tune, sing the tune, play the tune. I always do singing first, because I believe that if it's in your vocal cords, it's in your musculature, it's in your mind, it's really much easier than to put it on the instrument. So I really believe in that. And then just, yeah, so for example, the Chet Baker that we did, and I've been doing actually with other people, because there's such lovely, beautiful things that Chet Baker did when he's doing his little singing, you know, 8 bars of absolute little musical gems. So something short, something sweet, short and sweet. And basically, so what you're trying to do is as Sam said earlier, you're trying to get into the mind of the person who's singing or playing it, and you're trying to get into the musical mind of them. So you're actually trying to get, first of all, the actual sound of the basis of the tune itself, the melody and the harmony, and then you're trying to get their solo. In order to look at the intervals, hear the intervals, play the intervals on the instrument, but also to get a whole sense, like a schema, of the phrasing, of the sound, of everything. So you start off just being able to get a bit of the contour, then you're going to be able to get a bit more, you get a few intervals, then you get the whole phrase, then you get the rest of it. And by the end of it, you're actually listening and imitating the actual phrasing in a really subtle way. So not only just the, you know, the dynamics, where it comes right down, any little subtle time shifts where they're not quite on the beat, they're just holding back a bit, all that stuff. And so over a period of time, you can actually absorb somebody else's musical intentions, and that is a really good way of getting to your own. So what you can do then is take a little phrase that you like, you can transpose it, you can see if you can develop that in a certain way, you can look at the same standard and use that as a starting point to create your own tunes. Obviously you got to have some, you know, you need to have the theoretical background that will help you to do it as well, but I think hearing it first is primary. Hearing it, singing it, playing it, and then, you know, actually just absorbing that music. That musicality is really, really important and precious. Somebody else's whole musical idea, you know. And people say to me, go on.
I was going to say, even in doing that, you are still retaining your personal identity, because it's often you're choosing phrases that you particularly are drawn to, things that please you musically. So that's already your personal choice. You're developing things so that you get an ear-instrument relationship. You hear something and that's what you need. That's that immediacy, isn't it? To be able to play it on your instrument. So it's still your sound, it's your instrument, it's your interpretation. So it's not something that's divorced of the personality of the person that's doing all of that work. And it's developing the musicianship skill as well.
It's, I mean, to me, it's, and I remember talking to Dave Liebman about this, because Dave Liebman, he's a big, you know, jazz educator in the States and everything, and at the New School, and a big, you know, and he just said it's all craft. It's craft for all, as you're a child and into being a student. Craft, just focus on the craft element. The art will come out, your musical identity will come out. It won't, you're not going to lose it by imitating other people, or by, you know, it's going to be growing inside you. And I've always taken that approach, because I think you can go a long way with imitating, with listening, with working on stuff, with adding material to your repertoire, with, you know, particularly deep listening, and particularly with bits of transcription. So I don't, you know, I think people just imagine, I think a lot of people just imagine that you suddenly get this, or people are suddenly talented and get this, you know, artistic, you know, but touched by God kind of thing. But we all know it's an awful lot of craft, and I'm quite happy to, I mean, that, to me, that's a really great thing, because it means anybody can become really very good at it, you know, if you do the right things. So yeah, I take the craft-based approach.
So one of the things that we probably haven't made clear is actually what the instruments are that you both play. So Cathy, you're a guitarist, and Sam, you're a pianist, keyboard player. And Sam, you often do regional work with us, with a lot of the younger kids. And I'm thinking one of the things that we get time and time again is the fear and false expectation that by playing this music, that instantly someone's going to play an extended solo that lasts 32 bars or more, you know, from the very first session. And there are ways of actually building things up, as Cathy said, small and short, and it's like little phrases. You wouldn't expect somebody stand up and spontaneously improvise a long story. You know, you'd expect maybe short sentences and a shared collective. So might you share some of the ways that you have been teaching to encourage the groups to improvise without necessarily saying, right, off you go for 2 minutes and we'll see you at the other end?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, great point, actually. I think that, I mean, one of the things that I think is great about jazz is that it was a kind of folk music anyway. So, I mean, it's obviously got, you know, it's kind of got so many different strands now, but really the way that people would have learned jazz, you know, when it was being born would have been exactly that, just sort of get stuck in and have a play and have a feel around and get used to it. So I kind of try to take, I mean, when I've been doing the regional work in person with the group there in the room, I like to just try to take the approach of like, let's just be confident, let's just have a go, we play this tune together and just, you know, have a go at your solo and try and get stuck in. And we'll talk a bit about theory and what, you know, give a few tips to help. But I think the main idea is if you just go for it, you're going to find out pretty quickly what works, you know. So because I think the biggest barrier, especially for people who've only ever had a kind of classical background before, is the fear of improvising and the fear of getting stuck in, because of this thing about there's all this information that you can potentially use to your advantage. But you're coming to, if you've heard about jazz and you know that there's lots of scales and chords and patterns you have to know, and then you're trying to improvise for the first time, think, oh, it's not a language I speak. But I think just by getting stuck in and playing simple folky tunes, you know, groovy, simple tunes from the roots of jazz, New Orleans kind of stuff, that's a really good way in, because you get a feel for where the improvising would have started in the first place, you know. I don't know if I've answered the question that well there.
Yeah, you have. very in a really lovely way, because I think after that, once you've heard the individuals do their initial solos, that gives you a snapshot into them as musicians, and you can see how to help them progress on their journey. I think one of the things about that fear is that people forget two things. One is that the people that they're working with, so the tutors, have had to go through that fear themselves, and often still are in new situations. It's just part of the course, but with that, then the environment that we're in, there's great kindness and empathy as well. It's not a judgmental environment. And the other thing is that, it is part of the course. It is something you do have to do. You have to be bold and take those risks. But again, small steps and bite-sized pieces. And do you ever do things where the youngsters are only asked to do a small amount of improvising, maybe collectively as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think the collective improvising thing is a really cool way to get in as well, because you don't feel so exposed. I mean, one of the most invaluable thing about that situation that NYJC gives them as well, I think, is that it's a really safe environment to try it all out. We're all just there having a go at it for the first time, and we're all in it together, trying to help each other figure it out. And I think once you get that feeling of camaraderie, that we're all just trying to play and get used to it, and that no one's there to kind of, you won't get in trouble if you get it wrong or anything, then I think that feeling sort of nurtures itself after a while. I mean, I don't know what I'd be interested to hear what your two experiences were growing up with all the music, but for me, it was like, I felt like a lot of stuff I kind of either taught myself or just picked up by osmosis from being around people and playing. Just the things I learned, the hardest things to learn were the things where you just got to like kind of do something on your own. For me, if I was in a situation, I've just got to do it, and we figure it out together as a band. That was such a great part of the education for me. So it's not about theorizing it as much as just kind of getting stuck in. I don't know.
I think also from what you said about the group side of things is that if you're left on your own to have a melodic narrative, you're creating a solo, it's very easy, especially early on, to run out of ideas. But if you're doing it collectively, that even the newest of musicians will hear something that someone else has played, and that will just give them something to then feed off. And so I think that's all part of the course anyway, within the way that we play the music. Cathy, I'm wondering, Sam just touched on something, which is the fact that jazz education hasn't been here forever, and you and I are old enough to know when we were growing up there was hardly anything that was certainly not the formal degrees, and now we're such an integral part of the actual delivery of it. But how did you come to learn all of the music and develop your skills when you were the same age as the youngsters that we now work with? What was your story?
Well, I used to play the violin, so I played in an orchestra, so I kind of played classical music a bit. And then I took the guitar up, and then I started playing in big bands, and I was just playing the chords. So for years and years, I mean, literally years, several years, I was just playing the chords and learning the chords and sitting in the rhythm section and just getting the hang of it and listening and, trying to do stuff. I didn't do any improvising. I didn't do any single line stuff. I didn't really know what to do. And then I heard two things. I heard Goodbye Pork Pie Hat by Charlie Mingus, and I heard Small Hotel by Wardell Gray, and it was on a Charlie Parker album. I thought it was Charlie Parker. Obviously it wasn't. It was whatever. I later found out it was Wardell Gray. And I was just completely transfixed with it. I thought, the Wardell Gray, I was like, I couldn't believe it. It was just something amazing. And then when I heard the Goodbye Pork Pie Hat, it was the Booker Owen solo, where he kind of wails over the top, it's like a proper lament. And I was like, what is this? What's this? It's just, and then I was really into it then. So then I got into Leeds College of Music at a time when, I mean, they really took a chance on me, because all I could do really was play some chords. I had a kind of musical understanding and I could play a bit, but, they really were very good about that, taking me in. But the actual, where I was in East Sussex, they wouldn't give me a grant because it was a jazz college, a jazz course. And they only gave money to classical music.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Can you
Wow.
imagine? Can you imagine? Yeah, they didn't do it because it was something. Not sure about this. So anyway, and the first year I did the course, and then it was Dick Horden at the time. Actually, he wrote me this glowing testimonial, and I got the grant the following years. But the first year was really desperate because we were living on lentils and stuff. Going down to Leeds Market and living on nothing. Because there was nothing. But then I started, and what was really good for me actually was there was this guy called Eric Kershaw, who's an old dance band guitarist actually, and he played at the BBC in the 20s, when it was live on the radio, and they all had to dress up in suits, you know, and actually time everything so that it was exactly to the hour. It was fascinating. Anyway, and he had this whole book of guitar ensemble pieces that he played at the Ritz and at the Savoy and all kinds of fancy places, and that really helped me because I was able to learn to read. I had to play a part, and then you had like a little 4-bar solo in the middle of it. Which basically his approach was like extemporizing first, and I think extemporizing is a really good approach to improvisation for beginners anyway, because I think you can take the tune and really do something with it and know what the tune is and really develop it from that. So that was my introduction to it, and I think I was on 4th guitar or something, you know, because I wasn't very good. And then one day the first guitarist was sick and we had to do a gig, and Eric said to me, Cathy, I think you should do this. And I was like, no, I can't possibly do it. But anyway, I did it. And then after that, I was kind of off, because I could be able to get around the solo. I could play the part. I was, it's one, you have to take those leaps, don't you? You have to take a leap of faith.
And sometimes you don't know it of yourself until you're actually put in those situations.
That's right.
Were you surprised by yourself?
So he knew.
But were you surprised by yourself? It's like, oh gosh, I didn't actually think I'd be able to do this.
Yes, I didn't have the confidence at all. I used to when I performed this hand, I used to shake with my like this. Every time I performed, I was so nervous, trying to do stuff that I was on the edge with, and so I had to get over that. So I did all that, and then after that, I was kind of off, and then I started learning all sorts of things, and it got better, and I started to do more improvising, and I had more confidence and all of that. So that's where I was. I mean, I did have a really musical upbringing because my parents had sort of very eclectic tastes, and so I listened to all kinds of classical music, Bach and all Hindemith. Actually, they liked Hindemith, and then they had the Beatles, and then they had sort of Chicago blues music on, and then we had all the pops. You know what I mean? It was really, really, and they played music all the time. So I had the music inside. But
there's a nice connection there with what you just said. Charlie Parker was a big fan of Hindemith, as was Kenny Wheeler.
Yeah, so, I know. It's just, yeah.
And so, Sam, fast forward, there you were, 2007 in the NYJC summer school. Where were you in your musical journey at that point? So, who was Sam in 2007 as a young jazz musician?
So I mean it was a funny time actually, because the course was the very first course. It was amazing. I met Cathy there, and then I think it was only like two weeks later I actually started studying with Cathy again at Leeds College of Music. So and the course was at Leeds College of Music as well. So it was quite funny because I got to sort of see the place and be at the college for a couple of weeks before it opened for me anyway, But it was cool. It was a good time because I was really motivated about jazz, but probably didn't really know that much. I mean, I had the confidence that I could kind of just about get through a few standards in a jam situation. I go there and we used to have these jam sessions on the course. You still, apart from this year, there's always a big element of the summer course is the jam session, isn't it? So
every evening.
I remember going to those and being like, well, I could just about get through this. But I was really motivated and really excited. And especially after that week and meeting all the other young people, because before that, I mean, I've got a few sort of jazz friends in Birmingham where I was growing up, but not many. And we never had like a serious band or anything together. I'd never done that much playing in a group. So that was basically what I was super excited about, just getting stuck in and playing with people. And so then I came on NYJC and I was like, and this was like the days before everyone was all super visible on social media. So I was like, who are all these other 18-year-olds that are into jazz? I had no idea that there was anyone else out there.
How important was it to you to meet because it's something when I talk to the youngsters, everyone that's watching probably doesn't realise that I have a tutorial with all of the youngsters, individual 15-minute chat, and it comes up time and time again, like, oh my gosh, it's so amazing to be amongst other people my age. Often they haven't met anybody their age that's as fascinated by the music and as passionate about it. But how important was that to you to have that opportunity to be with your peers? I mean, couldn't you just go along and play with anyone? Why did you need to meet people your own age?
Yeah, it's funny actually. I was having this conversation with someone the other day about. So there was. I won't say who it was, but someone was kind of being the devil's advocate for. Do we need this kind of situation. I know I ended up saying like, yeah, I mean, I would never have even thought about becoming a jazz musician. It would have been like this hobby I had, and I wouldn't have thought there was even a community out there to get involved with. You know, I had no idea they were out there. I was completely blown away by. I mean, now I think it's a bit different growing up. It's easier to find out about these things, but just to actually meet everyone for the first time, I was like, what? This is insane. You know, I couldn't believe it. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, for me, that was just amazing.
Yeah.
Are you there, Izzy? I can't see you anymore. Can you, Cathy? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, I'm just reminded of when we were at Leeds College of Music, and I used to come in early because I used to come in at 8 o'clock because it was the time to get some work done. And who would be there but Sam? And the practice rooms weren't open, but I had the key. So we used to have a cup of coffee and a muffin, and then he used to go into the practice room early. And so,
yeah, I remember.
And I always reminded
really,
of that. I
totally owe you one for that, Cathy. Yeah, thank you so much. And they wouldn't I remember they wouldn't let us have the keys that early, and you would just sort me out every day. That was so great, Cathy. I owe you one.
Am I back? Have I returned?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh,
I can hear you.
I don't quite know what happened there.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
So yeah, just saying about all the opportunities that are now available, much more opportunities available for the young people. We've actually had some conversations about, so what grades do you need to have in order to play the music? And I think we all find that very difficult. And I know the folk community and also the Indian community find it very difficult to be able to measure things according to the associated board grades. It's I think that's why the auditions that we do are so important. That's the real way that we get to hear the young musicians, and it's not a judgmental. It's much more diagnostic, so that we get to know and then match people up. Cathy, you've actually gone on to do some really serious research into the sort of the motor neuron side of things, and I wondered if you might talk to us a little bit about that and what was that inspired you and what your findings were. And also, while you're there, I wondered if you might explain what extemporize is, because I think there was a question saying, what is that?
Okay, we'll start with that. I will start with that. Yeah, extemporize just means to have the melody and just play around the melody. So that's when I've taught a lot of classical musicians in my time, and they're always terrified about improvising. So I always used to give them a piece of music and say, let's learn the tune. So we'd learn the tune by heart. Then I'd say, right, okay, now let's just use that as a contour to actually start improvising without any chords, without any theory, just by the sound, you know. And that really works. So extempore, it's not really done all that much actually, but actually it's got loads of potential, extemporizing. And lots of people do it. Lots of people used to do it. They don't do it so much now. And I think people get hung up on scales and theory and stuff to a point where sometimes they get paralyzed by it. You know what I mean? Where in actual fact, any musician, anybody starting playing, can make something up themselves. They just need the tools to do it. And I think what happens with classical musicians is that they're used to triggering music by visuals. And also you have to turn them to triggering purely by aural. But once they've actually got the hang of that, there's no problem, because they've got the tons of musical ideas and musical experience inside them that they can use. It's just that initial thing of thinking, where do I start? You know. So there's that. Yeah. So basically, I was very interested in how you start with, as I was explaining, you start with a tiny motif or you start with an interval, and how people develop the intervals to a phrase, and then how they develop a whole individual voice. How does that happen? That's what I'm interested in. How do you come to be able to start playing little scales and maybe little arpeggios over a tune, know that it's a D minor or whatever, and then suddenly at some point in the future you come to be able to play a whole beautiful solo that's entirely yours. It's you playing it. It's your voice. It's your musical conception. What's the process? And that's a big question. Obviously, that's a really ambitious thing to ask. But so I was actually interested in the motor process. So I was interested in how. And I did it through the focus of the schema. So the schema is like a framework in the mind that structures experience. So for example, the easiest way to explain schemas is driving. So you know when you learn to drive, you're really clunky, aren't you? You're worried, you can't coordinate anything, everything's crunching through the gears and whatever, and you know the driving instructor is basically looking out the window because you're concerned about steering more. You're not really, you know, but gradually it all smooths out and you're able to move it. And then You can drive with the radio on, you can drive having a conversation, you can drive with the map there, you can, you know what I mean? So then it becomes automatic. So that's the way. But to do that, you've got to go through a whole lot of steps. And what happens is, in the mind, the brain organizes all those steps discreetly so that it becomes a flow. But it won't become a flow until the brain has organized all the movements. Okay, and that takes time. It depends how, and it all depends on the individual. Okay, so it takes as long. So for improvisation and to learn improvisation, it takes as long as it takes you in order for the brain to organize all that. And it depends on what instrument you're learning. So some instruments are more difficult than others. So for example, the guitar is quite a lot more difficult because you've got about 10 different places you can play the same note. Whereas the piano is not. I'm not saying any of this is easy, by the way. I'm not saying that. But the piano, you can see it all there. So in actual fact, you've immediately got visual patterns and so on to go on. For instance, where it's much more difficult on the guitar. And the voice is difficult again because you've got nothing. So the voice, you actually it's all being learned through the muscles and through hearing. And so that's more difficult again. And so I was interested in that whole process of actually, so I'm interested in the intervals and the space on the instrument and how that is absorbed into the brain, and then how the brain organizes that to be able to create the solo. And so I created a whole theory around that, and then I did a whole lot of action research with students, right, for ages actually. I did it for the PhD, and then I did it at Leeds College of Music. Actually, recorded all the lessons, and what I was trying to do was to see how that. So the thing about a schema is that you can adapt it. So, for example, once you've learnt to drive, you can be driving off road, or with a bit of practice, you can be driving up hills. You can go to a completely new place, and you can drive there because you know what the conditions are. You don't have to be driving on a straight road or whatever like a robot. So the thing about improvisation and learning to improvise is once you're able to do it in one place, in one key, in one space, you can adapt it. You can generalize it. That's the key. The key to think about a schema is you can extrapolate and generalize it. And that's why we differ from, for example, robots, where they have a single program. That is changing now with AI actually, but robots have got a program and they can only do that. We learn a skill and we can immediately adapt it, and so that's how we can. So yes, then I did a PG cert at the Royal Northern, and I did a big project for that. Again, I was trying to follow. What I was trying to do was it's too big actually, and it's too ambitious altogether. But what I was trying to do was to follow somebody's development and see whether what I was teaching or the approaches we used to teaching was actually making a difference to what the outcomes were and how they developed. And so for example, in one project, I had all the things they played it at the beginning of term, then 6 weeks on, then 6 weeks on, then 6 weeks on, and recorded it to see whether any of the interventions or any of the things that we were doing or that they were doing was making a difference. So yeah, that's it. Really.
Brilliant. And what's really lovely about that fits in with a lot of observations that when we do CPD, so professional development for music teachers, who particularly those that are working with jazz for the first time and they want to support their students, but they're still nervous about how can we support them and what sort of things can we do. By watching us, say for example, seeing Sam teach the beginner groups in some of the regions, that they're really taken aback by how the pace of what we do, the slowness of it and the repetitiveness of it, and then taking one step and then, as you say, putting it in a certain context and then taking it into a different context. So there's a real natural sense of evolution. There's not that rush to even finish a whole piece in one day. It will go at its natural tempo. So it's really lovely to hear it described in the way that you just have as a sort of a biological thing. It makes sense. The way that we're doing things, it quantifies and qualifies it beautifully. Yeah. Sam, I'm really wondering about your particular love of Brazilian music, and I'm thinking from what's Cathy just said there would have been a lot of mimicry and really getting to know the nuts and bolts of the music, and but then you now have a trio where you write original material, which is Brazilian. You call it Brazilian music. So how do you go from that emulating and taking the nuts and bolts and then making it your own? I wondered whether you might demonstrate something where maybe it's a pattern or a particular shape that you've taken from the Brazilian culture, and then how you've integrated it into your own music.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so I've been into it for a while, and I've been lucky because I've met a few Brazilian musicians that I've been working with for a while as well, and I've kind of been doing quite a few gigs over the years, learning, like we were talking about how you would learn in the old days jazz. I've basically been trying to do that with the Brazilian thing, you know, just baptism of fire, get in there, try and do it and keep going, you know. And I've been over there a couple of times and you know, but I love listening. It's always been a pleasure for me to listen to that stuff. So I've been getting really stuck in. So one of the things that I've been kind of trying to learn how to do is there's quite a few Brazilian piano specific kind of figures that go on, and it's a lot of it comes from the samba thing. So maybe I could demonstrate like what a couple of those are and how I've been working on them and what I'm still trying to do now.
Fantastic.
Let's see. I mean, can you hear the piano all right?
Yeah, great.
Okay,
yeah.
So I mean, to start with, I was just kind of learning the basic claves of things, but I think once you get a clave going, you can kind of be a bit freer with it. So that the basic patterns were this: taking the things from the drums and putting them onto the piano. So the surdo, which is the big drum in the samba, which is that sort of dum ka dum ka duk ka dum ka duk ka dum, is like always on the beat with an accent on the second one. So this long and short thing. So trying to get that going on, and then the right hand doing more the tambourine, which is this. This is a bit of a poor quality one here, but I've got a very cheap one here, which and this is in the samba, this would play like more what you might call the clave. So trying to sort of emulate that in my right hand at the same time. So my thing, and I'm not my thing, but the thing that I'm trying to do is to combine those Brazilian rhythmic drum things with more of a jazz sensibility in terms of how I play chords on the piano and how I voice stuff. And it's a thing that's, in Brazil, it's quite a big thing of its own already. There's loads of great Brazilian pianists who play that way. There's a guy called Cesar Camargo Mariano, who's just amazing. He used to play for Elis Regina. There's a young guy called Salomão Soares who's amazing at this stuff. Check him out if you haven't. Fabio Torres, he's a guy that I studied with there, and Andre Marquez plays with Meta Pascual. So anyway, there's this thing that I'm kind of trying to put it together between those things, and then after a while, trying to be a bit more. I mean, that's one example, but I've done that with like quite a few different patterns now, and trying to put them all together into sort of more free-flowing samba thing. I'll try and do a bit. So. You get the idea. Anyway. So trying to get that, trying to get it to groove along a bit, and emulate the sound of like a samba band, but on the piano,
So you've brought many of the different ingredients together. You are actually like a mass of different percussion instruments there, which I'm sure propels, because you play in a trio, don't you? And I'm sure that propels the trio. What's the other two instruments?
Yeah, so it's a slightly unusual trio because it's percussion, guitar, and piano. So we play. I mean, I play. It's when I think something really nice is playing piano and guitar, because you don't have set roles as much, and there's these things of the bass line, the harmony, who's soloing, who's playing more melodic consonant, and all this stuff. That's just up for grabs all the time. So, so that's why I've been trying to get all this stuff together, so I can take over whatever I feel is needed at that point,
So there aren't designated roles per instrument. It's the percussiveness of it all, and the drive, and the foundation of it all permeates all the different instruments. So it's like catch, isn't it? Like with a frisbee, like you
exactly,
take over.
I mean, I
Brilliant.
always think it's a bit like football. Like you just kind of throw the stuff around, and you know, just different things come up, and you need to like figure out how to get around them. You know.
But we did say actually when we were in the rhythm section workshop that the guitar as used as a percussion instrument, it's not used as much now as a percussion instrument, and in Brazilian music it really is still. And so you can keep well up. We were talking actually because people were interested, weren't they, in the difference between in trying to play together with guitar and piano, and what the difficulties, or you know, what are the we both love it. You see, we both love playing guitar and piano in different contexts. But you know, if you're using the guitar, you can also use the guitar very much as a percussion instrument, which people don't do as much now, and that gets well out the way of the piano. And same with the piano. It's yeah, it was good, wasn't it? We listened to, actually, this is another one from our rhythm section. We listened to Jim Hall and Bill Evans' intermodulation.
Oh, yeah.
And it's just it's so beautiful, and they do it so well. You know, and one of the things is actually that Jim Hall sometimes just plays two notes as a chord, you know, and just plays all flowing line down, and Bill Evans is doing all sorts of things in his truly sort of orchestrated chord thing. But yeah, so I'm interested in that, and we love Maître Pasquale. We put him on years ago at Leeds Jazz, you know, and he did this amazing procession around the. It was just wonderful. It was wonderful music. Yeah.
He's so imaginative and colourful. His music is so colourful, isn't it?
Beautiful.
If people haven't come across it, they should. Is there anything that you might recommend, a sort of a track of his that either of you might recommend, just to sort of start that ball rolling?
It's all really complicated and long and really complex.
But just to listen to as an audience, just to get that flavour.
Talking about Maître Pasquale, something to recommend of his.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a few albums that I like. There's a really cool earlier album called Quarteto Novo, which is him and Ayato Moreira, and it's quite fun tunes, but then it's a bit crazy as well, you know. So it's quite like happy music with loads of crazy stuff going on in it. That's one of my favorites. Definitely recommend that album.
Yeah, on this gig he was playing toys, you know, he was actually playing toys, squeaky toys and things. Yeah, it was just yeah.
It's that lovely playfulness, that sort of the same zone as when we're children, you know. Obviously he's become a master craftsman, but he's still in touch with that playful inventiveness and not shy about it at all, and he expects it of his musicians as well. I know some people who've played with him who have taken a little while to adjust to that, and then once they find it in themselves, there's a shyness sometimes that prevents them from diving straight in, but once they make that connection, then they never look back, and they carry that on. Cathy, we've talked a few times on Facebook on the live stream. We've talked about, you know, sort of your educational work when you were teaching on the summer school. We've talked when the heads of jazz came and your role as an external examiner, and you've referred to the work that you were doing at Leeds here on this chat and the research you've been doing. You also have got a radio station that you do interviews for, and you've written lots of papers. But at the heart of it all is this wonderful guitarist who comes up with beautiful pieces herself, and we always are so excited every time we have the opportunity to hear your music at the summer school or at a gig. So I'm wondering whether we might now meet Cathy, the composer and guitarist, and whether you might tell us a bit about your sort of.
Do you want me to play? Is there time to play something?
Yeah, wonderful. Absolutely.
All right.
Definitely.
All right. Okay. Yeah, I just write little tunes. I like harmony. I like a lot of harmony. I like a lot of groove. I like, you know. So this is cool. I'm going to switch the thing on. Yeah, I just think it's. I like complexity in music. You know, I mean, I like in the compositions. I don't like complexity in music, but I just like to hear lots of different rhythms and harmony and so forth. So this is. Let's just switch this on. Yeah, this is Wishful Thinking. So this little tune I wrote a few years ago, and it's quite long. So if you think it's going on too long, just go like that or whatever. Okay. Okay, here we go.
Yo!
Nice one, Cathy. That was great.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
I love the way it evolved, and I love the way that it's a real master of melody, and it was triggered off by the composition and the way that you drew on the motifs, and then it just kept growing and evolving. But it was that lovely narrative. There's a real sense of story, and I loved what you did with time as well, when you kept flipping in and out. And I think anyone that's listening to it, they should go back and listen to it several times and really draw on it, like the way that we talked about, with all the recordings. This is another example of how to take some real ingredients from what Cathy's just played and do what Sam was talking about. Take it out and put it in your own context. Really sort of experiment and explore it. Both of you, the same with the Brazilian piece as well that you played, Sam. I'm hoping that people will definitely draw on it. I'm also very pleased to see that Facebook hasn't shut us down. So that's nice to know that we a little experiment was going on there, social experiment. I'd like to welcome to the stage, if I may, before we close for this evening, I'd like to welcome our dear programme manager, who was also on the summer school a little bit later after Sam, and is now working with us as our core programme manager, doing great work. And Nick, I think you're going to come and talk to us about how to stay connected with NYJC and even how to support us.
I am indeed, yes. So if you would like to stay connected with NYJC, you can sign up for our newsletter, which you can find at nationalyouthjazz.co.uk/sign up. And if you'd like to make a donation to our much needed bursary fund, we're really keen of supporting as many young musicians as we can, regardless of their financial background. If you could head to nationalyouthjazz.co.uk/donate, and that's where you'll be able to find a place to donate.
And a lot of parents being freelance, we've been able to help a lot of the young musicians over the summer engage where, if we hadn't got a bursary scheme, we wouldn't have been able to. So that's now slightly depleted because of the support we've given. So if you'd like us to replenish it so we can carry on working with young musicians at this time, I know that the young musicians are feeling a little isolated. They're not getting the opportunity to connect locally, music making. And one thing I think it's really important for us to all remember is when we talk about the schooling and the core topics, the core subjects, actually for the people that we're working with, music is the core subject. It is their very core, and they're very much missing it. So any opportunity we can have to keep them engaged, whether it be online. I'm actually going to be leading something in person in South Derbyshire on the 29th of October. So we're starting to very slowly come out of being online and starting to do things face to face. So I'm looking forward to reporting back on that when I finish. Nick, might you just tell us who are we talking to next week before we sign off?
Yes, absolutely. So next week we're going to be joined by the amazing saxophonist Tori Freestone, and along with Tori, we're going to also be speaking with Sarah Matthews, who is based up in the East Midlands, I think still, and we're going to have like a feature on folk music, which is something very keen to, or close to NYJC's hearts this year.
As well as playing fantastic saxophone and within her own composition, being influenced by folk music, Tori's also a really fine violinist and flautist as well. So the nice thing about the conversation next week is looking at being genre fluid, and what do you mean by we're a jazz musician? We want to be playful and see what common ground we've got between the folk and the jazz as well. We've got a really wonderful relationship with the English Folk Dance and Song Society, which is we're going to be working together a lot next year. So we're really excited about sharing that with you. But in the meantime, I'd like to sign off by saying to both Sam Watts, are you still there, Sam?
Yep, I'm here. Yep.
And also to say to Cathy Dyson, are you still there, Cathy?
I'm still here. I'm still here.
I've
Yep.
thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. It's been brilliant. And I could go on forever listening to you and asking you both questions. Really looking forward to continuing working with you during this academic year. Can't wait to see you both in person. And but in the meantime, I want to thank you both hugely for all the work you've done over the summer. Sam, you've been working with the regional projects and then the summer school itself. And Cathy, you've been working with the summer school and now are encouraging us to sort of do some research into how can we sustain that support online as well. So to both of you, NYJC wouldn't be what it is without you both. A huge thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks, Izzy.
Thanks, Izzy. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, nice one.
Thank you.
For everybody that's watching, Cathy, thank you so much. Everybody, I'm actually going to take a mini break now, Thursday, Friday, first time since summer. So I'll see you when I get back. Ciao, have a good time.
Bye.
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 Yeah, nice one, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.